Luis and I spent half of our lives as a resentful married couple. Before we died, we both stared at each other and used the most venomous words, hoping that we would never meet again in the next life. He hated me for binding him with marriage and children, making him lose the chance to go to Beijing to become a singer. I hated him for spending all his time eating and drinking outside, leaving his seriously ill parents and 2 children to me. In our mutual resentment, we were reborn. We exchanged a glance in the crowd, then turned around without hesitation, each going our separate ways. I hope this time, neither of us will regret it. Chapter 1. The day I changed my university application. My dad walked into the study, glanced at me, and nodded in approval. All right, with your high marks, you should go to a good university. Stop running around after that boy from the Lee family. What's so great about him? My mom, hearing the noise from the kitchen, quickly ran in and pulled him away, giving him a stern look. I smiled as I watched their retreating figures, but suddenly felt a lump in my throat. In the previous life, I had run out late at night to find Luis at the train station. My parents, worried about me, were hit by a drunk truck driver while chasing after me. I never got the chance to see them one last time. I held back my tears and moved the mouse, decisively pressing the confirm button to change my application. Chapter 2. In the previous life, Luis, who had grown up with me, suddenly said he wanted to become a singer and go to Beijing to chase his dream. But before that, he had always said that being with me and going to the same university was his dream. To make that dream come true, I threw away my chance of going to a good university, using my 600+ points to apply to the same second-tier school as him. But just 2 days before the acceptance letters arrived, he suddenly said he wanted to go to Beijing to chase his dream. That night, Mrs. and Mr. Lee came to knock on our door, asking me to help find their son. In the previous life, I went. My parents, worried about me, followed me out and had a car accident. I found Luis, and Mrs. Lee and Mr. Lee told him it was because of him that my parents died. So he had to compensate me. So they forced Luis and me to get engaged and planned to marry right after we graduated. But by then, I was already pregnant in my 2nd year of college, and had to drop out early. We hurriedly got our marriage license. I was pregnant, gave birth, and took care of the child. 2 years passed in a blur. I was eager to return to school, but then my in-laws fell seriously ill and came to us for treatment. Luis told me to be reasonable. His parents had worked hard to put him through school, and now they were sick and needed care. As for him, of course, he would go to work and support the family. At that time, out of consideration for Luis's pride, I never mentioned that his meager salary was not enough to cover the children's milk powder and our living expenses. Eventually, I had to sell the house in my hometown to pay for my in-laws' medical bills and raise our 2 children. But while I gave up my education and worked hard to support this big family, he spent his small salary hanging out with a bunch of friends, chasing after his dream of becoming a singer. The pressure of the family suffocated me. After numerous failed attempts at communication, we started arguing fiercely. He called me harsh, narrow-minded, and said that if it weren't for me dragging him back, he would have become a big star in Beijing by now. He even accused me of using my parents' death to morally blackmail him into marrying me. I didn't hold back either, telling him it was a pipe dream for someone with a broken voice like his to become a singer. When he mentioned my parents' death, I lost control, rushed at him to make him stop talking, but he pushed me away forcefully. From then on, Luis began deliberately staying out of the house. His parents, who never cared about anything, blamed everything on me. They complained that I was unreasonable, narrow-minded, and only knew how to anger my husband. They completely forgot how they had begged me to find their son. In this crumbling life, I gritted my teeth, tightening my belt, doing odd jobs to support the family. But the children I raised with such effort were never close to me. They always gravitated toward Luis, who never cared about anything. I thought that once they grew up, they would understand. I waited for over 20 years, until they got married and started their own families. But instead of staying with me, they fought to have Luis live with them. They treated me coldly. Mom, you controlled us too much when we were younger. We don't want to hear any more lectures. Dad's dreams were crushed because of you. Now that he's older, We want to take him to Beijing and help him chase his dream. Grandpa and Grandma are right. You just want everyone to live the way you plan. You're selfish. I never expected my children to say such things. When I came home, heartbroken, I saw Luis packing his bags, proudly boasting that he was leaving me to live a better life. After managing this family for over 20 years, all I was left with was the label of a selfish, controlling person. Why was Luis so carefree? He didn't care about the family. But in the end, he became the enlightened father in my children's eyes. I rushed at Luis and pushed him. Luis froze for a moment, then immediately grabbed a vase and threw it at me. You dare lay a hand on me? I'll kill you. So, our deaths were actually the result of our mutual punishment after a violent clash. In the moment we both fell, I silently prayed, if there's a next life, please, don't let me meet Luis again. Chapter 3. The day I was reborn happened to be the same day I changed my university application. Looking at my parents still by my side, I firmly decided not to get involved in anything related to Luis. After the college entrance exam, the parties came one after another. My close friends and I had just finished one gathering when I saw Luis laughing and chatting with a few of his friends in the distance. I heard Luis isn't going to school anymore. He's going to Beijing to become a singer. Wow, isn't that the trendy Beijing drifter thing now? If he becomes a big star, should we get some signed photos in advance so they can appreciate and value? April, you and Luis grew up together, right? You must know about his plan to go to Beijing. A friend nudged me. I casually looked over the crowd, and our eyes met as Luis turned his head unintentionally. Just from that glance, I could tell Luis was reborn too. I don't know. I have something to do. I'm heading home, I said, without a second thought. If he wants to go to Beijing, then let him. What does his life have to do with me? Chapter 4. As Luis's departure day drew nearer, I acted coy with my parents, saying I missed my grandmother and wanted them to take me to her house to see the newly born ducklings. My parents have always spoiled me, so without hesitation, they packed their things and took me out. Just then, Mrs. Lee opened the door, and when she saw us leaving, she paused. Going out? My dad nodded cheerfully. The kid wants to visit Grandma. We'll be gone for a few days. Mrs. Lee smiled and nodded. Watching us leave, I pretended to be nonchalant, but my fists clenched in anger, trying to hide the emotions I didn't want to show. How laughable. I once thought Mrs. Lee treated me sincerely, but later, I realized from the very beginning, her intentions weren't pure. She had been eyeing our house for a long time, which is why, after my parents passed away, she worked so hard to push me into marrying Luis. At that time, I had lost my parents, living every day in sorrow. The kind and gentle Mrs. Lee took care of me, making me let my guard down. Since I also liked Luis, I naturally agreed. I never imagined that she had been scheming from the very start. I took a deep breath, suppressing the slight trembling that came with my anger, and smiled as I talked to my parents about the new pony Grandma had bought. But out of the corner of my eye, all he saw was Luis walking away in a hurry. Luis must have realized I was reborn too, so his plan to run away and chase his dream had to be sped up. When we arrived at Grandma's house and were enjoying dinner, my mom received a call from Mrs. Lee. Luis is insisting on going to Beijing to become a singer and isn't going to school anymore. We can't persuade him no matter what. Could you have April come back and talk to him? After all, they've always been close. And Luis listens to April, the exact same lines as in the previous life. My mom looked at me, troubled. After all, we were in the countryside, and it wasn't easy to go back. I calmly put down my chopsticks and took the phone from my mom. Mrs. Lee, this is Luis's decision. I can't interfere. Even if I did, he would just resent me. I think you should respect his choice, I said firmly, hanging up the phone without hesitation and blocking her number. The quick, decisive actions left both my parents stunned. Grandma was the first to speak, telling them to continue eating. She reminded them that other people's affairs were their own karma, and we should not interfere. I felt like Grandma couldn't have been more right. After dinner, I squatted in the yard, petting the soft head of a little dog, while my parents came over. April, what's been going on with you lately? Mom hesitated, her eyes full of concern. You just don't seem like yourself. Dad remained silent but looked at me with worry. Their concerned gazes made my nose tingle, and I wiped my eyes, realizing there were actual tears. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something. I had a dream. I lied, saying it was just a dream, and recounted everything that happened in my previous life. When I told them how I was manipulated by the Lee family after they died, Dad's face turned as dark as a pot. They had always believed me, especially since I told them everything started with Luis deciding to go to Beijing and Mrs. Lee asking me to help find him. They finally understood why I suddenly insisted on coming to Grandma's house and why I refused to go after Luis. My dear, my precious girl, Mom said, tears falling from her eyes as she quickly pulled me into a hug, comforting me with all her love. Dad, standing aside, lit a cigarette and made a decision. If April dreamed this, maybe it means the Lee family is our family's nemesis. I've made up my mind. We're moving. We're going to get as far away from them as possible. I never expected my parents to support me so wholeheartedly. My nose tingled again, and I nodded through my tears. At the same time, I hugged my mom even tighter, feeling the warmth of her embrace. After staying in the countryside for nearly half a month, I visibly tanned a little. On our way back, Grandma packed a carload of food for us. Before we could move out, we still had to stay in the old house for a while. When we arrived home, Mrs. Lee from across the street quickly opened her door. Her eyes were red from crying, but her gaze couldn't hide the lingering resentment. Chapter 5. Why aren't you answering my calls? Mrs. Lee questioned, her face even contorting in anger. Why won't you come back and help me find Luis? Mrs. Lee suddenly shouted, startling my parents. Clearly, they hadn't expected her to be this agitated. I, however, just coldly stared at her. After being a daughter-in-law for over 20 years, I knew better than anyone how this woman was skilled at playing her games and distorting the truth. My mom couldn't stand it anymore and was about to speak, but I tugged at her sleeve. Let's go inside. No need to engage. Mom wrapped her arm around me, glaring fiercely at Mrs. Lee, but still couldn't help but throw a parting shot. You can't even manage your own son, and you want April to help? What kind of son is that? You've got the wrong person. I'm telling you. Once inside, Dad immediately started contacting friends, setting up appointments to look at houses in the afternoon. If everything went smoothly, we might even move tomorrow. Mom and I sat on the couch, and she absent-mindedly ran her fingers through my hair. It's okay. It's okay. We'll stay far away from them. Very soon, we'll be far away. I nestled into her arms, softly murmuring, "MHM." The house hunting and moving process went faster than I expected. Even quicker than that, the acceptance letter had already arrived. This time, without Luis, without the car accident, I happily went to the school to collect my admission letter. When I came home, my parents were still discussing how much pocket money they should give me. We laughed together, happy beyond words. But sometimes, I still dream about the past life, how I held up a family with my meager savings, enduring the blame from my in-laws, the misunderstanding from my children, and the constant bickering with Luis, struggling through those years. But thankfully, I was starting fresh. Chapter 6. School soon started. When I stood on campus that day, my parents were also happy about my decision to change my application. In my previous life, at this time, I had just finished my parents' funeral and was walking in a daze with Luis toward a second-tier university in the outskirts. When people asked us what our relationship was, Luis would automatically distance himself from me, awkwardly forcing a smile. He would say we were just classmates, even though we were already engaged. I shook my head and pushed those unnecessary thoughts aside. I went with my parents to the registration office to complete the formalities. A new school, a new beginning. After my parents reluctantly left, I quickly adapted to the new environment. Everything around me felt so precious. In my past life, I had to put my studies on hold to take care of my child and the family. But now, I finally had the chance to continue. I was happier than anyone. During the winter break, I went home with my scholarship and the money I earned writing articles, and bought gifts for both my parents. They smiled so broadly, their eyes nearly squinting into slits, praising me for being the best little warm quilt, meaning I'm their most cherished child. That evening, they made a big dinner together. At the dinner table, Our family chatted about recent events, until my mom casually mentioned that she had seen Mrs. Lee a couple of days ago. She and her husband, Mr. Lee, went to the market to sell vegetables after they both lost their jobs. They lived off the relief funds, which was just barely enough. My mom sighed. I heard Luis signed with a company in Beijing. The training fees are several thousand a month, not including meals and accommodation. If he can make it, that's fine. But if he can't, I lowered my head, picking up food. But in my heart, I couldn't help but laugh mockingly. Luis wouldn't succeed. And I wasn't cursing him, it was just the truth. Luis was the kind of person who couldn't help but brag. As soon as he signed with some shady company, he posted about it on his social media. But he was too busy boasting about getting a deal and didn't even check the company's name. The company was Moonlight Entertainment, a small fraudulent company that had been exposed in my previous life. They made money by recruiting trainees, charging them for lessons, and then selling them to another unscrupulous, unregulated company. Those trainees were in a terrible situation. They paid tens of thousands for performance opportunities that never came, and they learned nothing. In the end, they were sent to another wolf's den. I heard that only one trainee managed to escape, and that person was from a wealthy family who paid millions in termination fees to regain their freedom. Luis had no idea, because at that time, he was too busy with his new college life, joining every club and living in bliss, completely forgetting the dream he once insisted on chasing, and his nostalgic thoughts about those dreams only surfaced when he argued with me, blaming me for everything. Mom didn't continue the conversation. She was an optimistic person and quickly found something else amusing to talk about with Dad. Laughing together, I smiled and listened to their stories, feeling my eyes crinkle with laughter. After we moved, I thought I'd never see the Lee family again. But unexpectedly, the next day when I was meeting a friend and walking past a store, Mrs. Lee appeared out of nowhere and grabbed me. She looked much more haggard than before. Her eyes were sunken, her lips dry, and she radiated a sickly aura. My friend hadn't arrived yet, and seeing that I was alone, Mrs. Lee's face lit up with a smile. She grabbed my arm and started nagging, mostly complaining about how we had left without a word and how her son was in Beijing for training and couldn't even come home for the new year. Mrs. Lee, I withdrew my arm. Sorry, I have to go. I'm busy. Her reaction showed she was surprised by my cold attitude. After she regained her composure, she blocked my way and spoke in a reproachful tone. April, why are you becoming so unreasonable? I've already let go of the fact that you didn't answer my calls, and now you're acting so disrespectful? Mrs. Lee relaxed her shoulders, fixed her hair, and then her tone became coaxing again. I know, you've always liked Luis. Now that he's in Beijing trying to become a big star, if you still want to be with him, it's not impossible. I looked at her, and the quick shift in her eyes told me she was up to no good. I heard you've moved into a bigger house. I bet the old house hasn't been sold yet. Here's the thing. Give me the keys, and I'll help you keep an eye on it. Do some cleaning for the new year. If you're not home, you can come stay with us. Luis will know someone is looking after the house and will feel at ease. Mrs. Lee continued, outlining her plan clearly. Once she had the keys to my old house, she could rent it out and make some extra money. And if I went to her house for the new year, it would not only serve as a way to show my parents I wasn't afraid of them, but she'd also get a free nanny and ATM for the holidays. How could I not see through her scheme? I just smiled and agreed easily. All right, Mrs. Lee, you wait for me to get back to you. I'll tell my parents. Don't worry about buying anything. I'll take care of everything when I come over. Mrs. Lee was overjoyed, showering me with compliments before reluctantly leaving. I patted the place she had grabbed, sneered, and walked away. Chapter 7. This new year, I had a good time. As for Luis's parents, I'm sure they didn't have it as well. Of course, I didn't give them the keys, nor did I bring any food. During the new year, it's difficult to buy anything, especially vegetables, fruits, rice, and noodles. Even if you can find them, the prices have doubled. They now have to support a son chasing his dream, so they couldn't afford to spend that money. I didn't hide the fact that I tricked Mr. and Mrs. Lee. I directly told my dad that Mrs. Lee was still trying to trap me into being their family's nanny. My dad was furious that I hadn't taken advantage of the situation more. Shameless. What do they think they're doing? Trying to get my university daughter to take care of those two old geezers? Dad glared. If they cause any trouble, I'll deal with them. What a bunch of nonsense. I couldn't help but laugh at my dad's full-on bias. Feeling a little giddy. But what I didn't expect was that, before the new year was even over, Luis came back. And not only did he return, but he brought a girl with him. Chapter 8. I ran into Luis and the girl on the street, and the two of them were cuddled up, whispering sweet nothings to each other. When Luis saw me, he instinctively pushed the girl away. She stumbled, her face darkening instantly. Luis, what's wrong with you? You begged me to come back with you, and now you're pushing me away. Luis was instantly flustered. He hurriedly tried to comfort the girl, but he couldn't help but glance at me. Perhaps the past 20 years of marriage had made him develop the habit of constantly watching out for signs of betrayal. Even though we were no longer together, his old reflexes hadn't disappeared. I glanced at him, and when my eyes swept over the girl standing next to him, she looked familiar. After a moment, it clicked. I suddenly understood why. In my previous life, everything had been going fine, but Luis suddenly decided to go to Beijing to become a singer. I understood why. Despite being in a committed relationship with me, Luis stopped mentioning the past. I also understood why the later Luis hated me so much. I couldn't stop myself and laughed out loud. When my mocking gaze met Luis's, I silently cursed under my breath and turned around, leaving without hesitation. The girl's name was Ondine. She had briefly transferred to our class during our senior year. She was young, beautiful, vibrant, completely different from the girls in our class who only focused on studying. In fact, during the short time Ondine was there, she had already become the white moonlight for all the boys. I hadn't expected Luis to fall for her too. One day during a class power outage, Luis casually sang a song by candlelight, and Ondine praised him endlessly, saying his talent was so great that he could become a famous singer in Beijing. Ondine was from Beijing, and at that time, for us living in a small town, the word Beijing was something distant, almost unreachable. Looking back now, everything makes sense. After Ondine left, Luis's attitude toward me changed. He started criticizing me for not being ladylike enough, for not being as graceful as Ondine. He told me I was too focused on studying and didn't have a desire to see the world. He said I didn't know how to dress and had missed the best years of being a young woman. I suddenly laughed. At that time, I naively thought he was giving me advice to make me a better person. Now, I realized it wasn't that at all. It was simply that he couldn't find any trace of Ondine in me and, unable to deal with his own frustrations, he started nitpicking at me. Even when we got married, he always wore a cold expression. After we registered, he suddenly said, "Are you happy now?" As if I had forced him to marry me, forced him to be intimate with me. He couldn't control his own desires. But in the end, he wanted me to bear all the consequences. This was Luis's way of dealing with problems. Chapter 9. I don't know how Luis reconnected with Ondine after moving to Beijing, but I do know that the Lee family had a rather eventful year. I heard that when Ondine arrived at the Lee family's house, it took less than half an hour for her to storm out in anger. Luis followed his white moonlight as she left and went straight back to Beijing without even a word to his parents. My mom, being the busybody she is, secretly found someone to inquire, and it turns out Mrs. Lee, upon seeing Ondine for the first time, immediately tried to set some ground rules for her. But Ondine wasn't someone to be easily intimidated, she sharply retorted and even flipped over the greasy dining table at the Lee house before storming off. My parents enjoyed watching the Lee family's embarrassment and happily sent me back to university, repeatedly reminding me to just focus on my studies and not worry about anything else. In my free time, I began writing more articles, and under the radar, I had already finished 3 books of 1,000,000 words each. The payment I received was more than generous. But then, Luis suddenly added me on social media. I rejected him several times, but he kept switching accounts to reach me. I became so annoyed that I had no choice but to accept. Once we became friends, Luis barely said a word to me except for some superficial pleasantries before he started complaining about how difficult life had been since moving to Beijing. There were so many people chasing their dreams, and his circumstances weren't great. Only his ability to charm others with his words and his decent looks had helped him win Ondine's attention. But after getting her, the high-class, elegant Ondine he'd once admired seemed to fall from her pedestal. After a period of intense affection, Luis couldn't hold back his nature and began demanding that Ondine take care of him. But Ondine wasn't like me. Being in a relationship with Luis had already been a step down for her, so there was no way she'd take on the role of caring for him the way I had. As a result, Luis was quickly dumped, and soon after, his management company went bankrupt. I had his messages set to do not disturb, but occasionally, I'd glance at them. I couldn't help but laugh when I saw this message. I'm really unlucky. Meeting this kind of company. I have to practice singing 14 hours a day. If I were still in school, how much happier I'd be. Ugh. All the women in Beijing are so materialistic. I'm not famous yet, but I will be, so why won't they even have a drink with me? I switched to a new company, but it's not much better. If I had known, I'd have never come here. Beijing isn't as good as they say. The people here aren't half as genuine as those in our small town. Yes. The people in our small town are genuine, which is exactly why the Lee family took advantage of that to exploit me in my previous life, treating me like a servant. From start to finish, I had been the fool. The truth was, no matter what path Luis took, he would always regret it, because he never truly put in any effort, nor did he try to accomplish anything. He was used to having everything arranged for him, but whenever things didn't go his way, he would blame others. He thought that if he made a different choice, everything would be better. People always tend to idealize other choices, and Luis was no exception. Selfish, cowardly, lacking responsibility, and good at running away, that's Luis. His so-called dreams, which he thought were so grand, turned out to be just as ordinary after he experienced them for himself. Once I finally understood all of this, I blocked Luis again and even changed all my contact information and accounts. Someone like him should remain in the past, rotting away in his own filth. But I never imagined that, after losing contact with me, Luis would actually come to find me in Beijing. Chapter 10. In my second year of university, I had earned some money from writing and used my memories from my past life to start a small media company. I signed several up-and-coming new media influencers who hadn't gained popularity in my previous life and began to help them with their operations. Soon enough, their accounts began to gain traction. With that came one advertisement after another. I was busy with both my studies and the company, and eventually, I brought my parents here and bought them a house. They were overjoyed, bragging to their friends about how successful their daughter had become, and constantly scrolling through short videos, trying to find more influencers for me to sign. One day, right after finishing an exam, I hurried out of the school to go to a company meeting. As soon as I left the campus, I was suddenly hugged from behind, with the person refusing to let go. Wife, I finally found you. I gasped in shock at the familiar voice but swallowed my surprise. After pushing the person away, I saw that it was none other than Luis. Luis was wearing an old leather jacket, his face marked with traces of cheap makeup. His yellowing teeth were visible when he forced a grin, making me feel nauseous. And yet, this Luis was covered in a heavy perfume and tried to hug me again, but I quickly stepped aside. I know you've reincarnated too, wife. You don't know how hard it's been without you by my side. Luis rambled on, and within a few sentences, I understood what had happened. Through Mrs. Lee's gossip, he had learned that I started a media company, and following the trail, he found the accounts of the influencers I managed. Realizing that I had become a small but wealthy businesswoman, Luis, instead of continuing to chase his dreams in Beijing, decided that getting back with me was his priority. He blocked my way, pretending to be deeply emotional. Wife, even though we've reincarnated, we can still start over. Don't you remember? We have 2 lovely children in our past life. The 6 of us were so happy together. I coldly stared at Luis's performance, unable to stop myself from rolling my eyes. Big brother, please wake up. Have you forgotten why we reincarnated? Luis's expression changed, and his gaze began to flicker nervously. I don't want to repeat the mess of our past life, but I'm just glad that, in this life, I've finally escaped from you. I exhaled, my disgust evident. You always use the excuse that I ruined your dreams and trapped you with marriage. Then come to blame and abuse me, even pushing everything onto the kids. Luis, let me ask you, what happened to your singer dream? What happened to your glorious days of fame? Why haven't you brought your mother, the empress of your life, to Beijing yet? Oh, wait. I shook my head at him. This life. Your mother's still sick and helping you make money for your dreams, right? I heard you even sold the house to buy an electric guitar. Do you get it now, Luis? Luis's face turned ugly, and his eyes suddenly turned vicious. He grabbed my arm tightly. April, what are you so proud of? No matter what you do, you were still the woman I slept with and the one who raised my kids for over 20 years. You think you can escape just because of reincarnation? Luis's malicious gaze fell on me as he sneered twice. You've got some fame now. If I were to tell people about your birthmarks, your sensitive spots, you were always a slut. Let's see if your company will still thrive. Go ahead and say it. I jerked my arm free and looked at him with pure disdain. You always try to use the shameful tactics to get what you want. Luis, can't you do something to make people respect you? I called the doorman and told him Luis wasn't a student at our school. He was quickly held back as I seized the opportunity to grab a taxi and leave that place. The first thing I did when I got back to the company was to call one of the lesser-known influencers and spend the afternoon talking to her in my office. Chapter 11. A short video skit went viral online. The main story revolved around a young girl who, at the request of her neighbor, goes to the train station in the middle of the night to find the man she likes. However, while her parents, concerned for her safety, chase after her, they get into a car accident. The girl's kind neighbor takes advantage of the situation, getting rid of the girl's other relatives and persuading her to get engaged to her son. The neighbor even goes as far as buying the girl's family's property step by step. I decided to turn my story with Luis into a short drama, given that this genre was still quite fresh and the content was half true, half fictional. It quickly gained massive attention online. The man is such a jerk. His wife works so hard every day, and all he does is eat and drink, dreaming of becoming a singer. What kind of singer spends all day just talking? Even after being reborn, he still pesters the girl he failed to pursue. How shameless! If I had a son like that, I'd rather strangle him. His parents are no better. They're all good for nothing. The comments were pouring in, and the small blogger in charge of the shoot became an overnight sensation, gaining millions of followers. I took the opportunity to arrange several ads for her, and she made a small fortune. Of course, Luis wasn't going to let me off so easily. He started spreading nasty rumors about me online, portraying our relationship in a very ambiguous light. Some disgusting men even bought into it and joined in the insults. I wasn't having it. I sent lawyers' letters to each of them. After all, with the two lives so different, the idea of being reborn was so fantastical that no one would really believe those rumors. Luis was soon caught. His posts had been shared over 30,000 times, and he had paid for a team of online trolls to boost his cause. It was clear that he had dug his own grave. Lee's family was desperate, trying to track down our contact information, but they had no luck. During this time, Luis's company in Beijing also filed a lawsuit against him. He had violated company policies by leaving without permission and engaging in inappropriate activities. When I heard about it, I was honestly surprised. It seemed Luis had a knack for catching the attention of big shots for all the wrong reasons. Luis reached out through someone, begging me to help him hire a good lawyer. He promised that once he got out, he would repay me. Repay me? More like seek revenge, I thought. I made sure to have him kicked out, sending a message back. Dream on. While I could choose to leave the past behind and not seek revenge, that didn't mean I was just going to let it go. I wanted to watch Luis's life crumble and see my once caring in-laws spend their old age running around for him. I put on my sunglasses and headed to the company. The right path in life, the correct trajectory, my life would shine bright and be full of brilliance. Epilogue. When Luis was arrested, he was in a daze, faced with the police's accusations. He instinctively wanted to argue, but he didn't know what to say. In the end, he just gritted his teeth and reiterated that he and I were husband and wife. Yes, We were husband and wife. His mother had always said that. A couple. But traditionally, the husband was the one who held the power. I, a lonely orphan with no one else to marry me, should be grateful that he had even chosen me. At one point, Louise thought I was fine, obedient, understanding, and blush-inducing just from a few words. But then Undine came into the picture, and the fiery, passionate red rose reignited all of Louise's adolescent desires. In contrast, I had always been too indifferent. After we got married, Louise heard from a high school classmate that Undine had gone back to Beijing, enrolled in college, and even had a relationship with a famous singer before she even graduated. The day they made their relationship official, the news was all over the internet. Louise was filled with jealousy. If he had stuck to his dream, would he have been the one with Undine instead of that singer? And so, he began to resent me, the one who had stopped him from pursuing his dreams. If it wasn't for me, his parents wouldn't have died, and he wouldn't have been forced to marry me. It was all my fault. Had I not forced him into marriage, maybe he would have still had a chance to chase his dreams. For 20 years, Louise tortured me, taking pleasure in my temper getting worse, believing it was his punishment. He even told our 2 children that I was a bad mother, and they started turning against me. But he didn't expect to be given a second chance. He didn't realize how different his reborn life would be from what he had imagined. He was tired now. He even started to miss the days when I took care of him. When he heard I had money, he thought maybe we could get back together. Maybe I could make it big with April's money, he thought. But this dream was shattered when he was arrested. Even worse, his company was involved in the mess. When he learned about the huge fines and prison time awaiting him, Louise panicked. No, this wasn't right. His life shouldn't be like this. Could he get another chance? In the prison, as his brightly dyed hair was shaved off, he stared at his reflection in the mirror, closed his eyes, and a tear slid down his face. He regretted it. Could he have a do-over?